I wanna try and take in all the highs, embrace them for more than a moment's time. I want you, please don't move when I push you away. I know I contradict myself some days, but will you ride the lows with me?
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I am your host, Kristen Sunanta Walker. Our goal is to help discussions about mental health be a regular part of your daily life, no different than discussions about physical health. Mental illness can be a topic of discussion under the umbrella of mental health, along with so many other topics. This show is the original program on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. Our network of shows are played in over 180 countries and cover more topics under that umbrella than you can possibly imagine. We were talking about mental health long before it became cool and popular to talk about, and thank goodness it has become so popular. We have incredible guests, advocates, patients, experts, people. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy our intro music, a song named Lows, written by Aubrey Toon. You can find her music at www.aubreytoone.com.
That night when I started praying, I cried, will you ride the lows with me? Will you ride the lows with me? When I'm down, my vision gets blurry.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Mental Health News Radio. We have your favorite attorney here to answer some of the questions you've sent in. Evonne S. Hopkins from Raleigh Law Center. Hey, Evonne, how are you?
Hi, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. How about you?
Doing well. Looking forward to spring.
Yeah, oh my gosh. It's just listeners, so you know, and some of you are listening from much colder places than we are, and we so don't laugh at us, but it's cold for us. It's below freezing.
Yeah, we in North Carolina only like perfect weather. We're very funny that way.
I know, especially since most people are transplants from New York or Florida. Some of them want it super cold and some of them want it, a lot hotter, but we're kind of in the middle. We'd like it to just maintain a decent temperature where your teeth are not chattering.
That sounds like a good plan. Although I went to
Yeah.
Montreal recently, my shout out to Canada, had the most fun time. We went a few weeks ago, and it was just, I saw snow up to the top of stop signs. I've never seen snow like that, and that was a real blast.
Oh, wow. How fun. Yeah, we don't get it that we definitely don't even get anything near that here, but we get the 4 seasons, but they're pretty mild.
That's how we like it in North Carolina. Mild weather.
Divorce? Yeah, exactly. Mild weather and but divorces still come in hot.
Very true.
So I've got some questions.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to these questions. I'm interested in what people wanted to know more about.
Okay, so I won't say names or anything, just, listeners, why. But I have a woman that is asking, she's been able to avoid having to go in front of a judge so far in her divorce process. But they're selling their home and it's been ordered by the court to sell the house, and then they have to divide up the rest of that money. She doesn't know what to do with the money in the between time, and is she going to have to sit with her ex in the same room while they fight for the profits of the house?
Okay. So under North Carolina law, we have something called equitable distribution, which is the division of a marital estate. There's a presumption under North Carolina law, and this is similar in a lot of different jurisdictions, where the assets in the estate are presumed marital, if they're in existence at date of separation. And there's different burdens to meet, whether it's separate property or marital or mixed. And you don't need to go in front of a judge in order to get an equitable distribution, but you do have to come to either an agreement between the two of you as to what you're going to do. That could be done as a separation agreement. That could be notarized, or it could be done as a court order. Sounds like they reached a consent order from what you're telling me. Since they have a claim pending for equitable distribution, but they didn't have a hearing. They've agreed what's going to happen. And it sounds like in this case, what happened is the house is going to be sold, the proceeds are going to be divided however they're divided. Does she need to be in the same room for him as at closing? I think is the question. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. That she's looking for any possible. She has to prepare herself heavily for when he's going to be there, prepare herself emotionally, is what she states. So she's just concerned about like any instance that she might have to actually see him.
Right. There's no reason why the closing attorney can't have them sign closing documentation, because we do that all the time. So whatever needs to be signed for the closing, she can just go and sign fans or at a different time that day. They don't have to physically show up together to sign closing documentation. And the closing attorney can facilitate that for her. Now, I will say, like a sidebar, when we're dealing with divorcing a narcissist, which questions overarching a lot of our conversations,
right?
It's not always a victory to stay out of court. And the reason I say that is, of course, court is the last resort. It's where you want to go when exhausted all other possibilities, clearly getting your narcissist on board with whatever the quote agreement is and having them have buy-in is ideal, but not always possible because it's typically the narcissist way or the highway. And although they're assuring you that they are operating in the most generous and kindest and equitable of terms, we all know that there's only one person's interest that they're protecting, and that's their own.
Right.
So there are times, and it's something that we frequently discuss as high conflict lawyers, where there's just some cases that just need to be tried. Somebody else needs to tell this person what's going to happen, because that's the only way you can get a fair result.
Okay, that makes sense. I have another question, and it's related to custody of children. She says whenever she or he, this could be a he because the name is could be male or female, but whenever the children come back from being with the ex, they act like they've had the best time when they're there, and then they come home and they're an absolute mess, terrified, and it takes weeks to get them, back to normal. This person doesn't know how much of that they're supposed to pay attention to, what can be done about that in terms of custody, what should they be looking for if there's signs of abuse happening.
I wish we had like the ability to know how old these kids are and what the custodial schedule is. Do you have any indication from
7 and 9, and it's every other weekend and one night a week.
Okay. That's interesting that they're having such a hard time transitioning back with such a limited amount of time with the parents. So, few caveats. I'm going to answer this twofold. The first is, it's very possible that the children are manipulating the custodial parent. Okay. So kids are very, very aware of the conflict between parents and develop wonderful manipulation techniques because they know the parents don't trust each other. They know the parents don't believe the other parent, that there's no, it's just an easy situation to manipulate. So
Right.
I think the first thing to keep in mind is children always want to curry favor from their parents. And if that means they're going to hate on the other parent to curry favor with the parent they're with, they'll do that. That's just part of being a child in a divorced household. Now, to what
Right.
extreme it goes, I think depends on the environment. So I think it's important just to be aware that maybe this parent is being played by the children. Now,
Okay.
that's one lens, right? And I think it's a good lens to be aware of and be cautious. What I'm not liking in this scenario is there's such a limited amount of time with the parent who has visitation, and we'll talk about the custodial parent versus the visitation parent. The parent who has visitation has every other weekend, and it sounds like some kind of dinner visit. That's not a lot of time for kids to get in a routine or really get off of their routine. Now, they
Right.
are young, so it's possible that they're not on a sleep schedule. It's possible at the visitation parent's home, it's all just fun and video games till midnight, and you fall asleep when you fall asleep, and you eat all this junk. This parent has to unwind that because kids are creatures of habit. They want consistency,
Right.
they thrive on routine. So the, the concern I have is, to me, there's a possibility that this visitation parent is purposely being bombastic is the only word I can think of right now, but
Right.
being so outrageous in their behavior with these kids that it's really dysregulating them and throwing them off, possibly in an attempt to get more time,
Ah.
right? Because they may not be happy with every other weekend. They thought justice was 50-50, and they feel that the system was not just to them, so they're going to ruin every other weekend to show everybody, unfortunately, this is how you have to think, right? To show everyone that every other weekend's not appropriate. These kids really need to be with that person more. And the reason they're acting up is because they miss that parent.
Right.
So this goes to, I know I kind of talked in circles, but this goes to how this disordered person may be thinking. And it's not always the same lens as those of us who don't have various personality disorders. And so when you have a situation where someone's been ordered to do something, they don't like the outcome. One, they don't want to be told what to do. And two, wasn't their agreement. They don't have the buy-in. They could be causing mischief to create those problems.
And what
And
you do when you're working with a client, I mean, how I'm seeing your role, as at least what you try to be, is getting buy-in, because doesn't like whatever is best for the kids is what's best for the situation most of the time, I would think. And so sometimes you, as the attorney for, the other parent who has dealt with an abuser, but sometimes you do want buy-in because that makes it easier for the kids. Isn't that true?
I do think if you can manipulate the co-parent, I put in air quotes, because you're not co-parenting narcissist, that's fallacy. But for the
Right.
purposes of our discussion, we'll air quote the word co-parent. There has to be some level of buy-in to get cooperation. Those that have lived with a narcissist know how highly manipulative they are and know how manipulative you have to be to motivate them into thinking their desire, what they want. I do think buy-in's important. However, if you cannot accomplish it that's when someone else needs to say what's going to happen. And in our case, that's the judge. Hey,
Mm,
this is what the schedule is. All couldn't figure this out. I'm the adult in charge right now. I'm going to figure this out for you. Those situations, those are met with a lot of resistance from a narcissist because they don't like to be told what to do as an authority figure. They're going to create mischief. They're going to create problems. They're going to make it not work to prove to everyone that this wasn't the right solution and
mm,
prolong, unfortunately, the litigation until they get what they feel like they want and what they deserve and what should have happened. So then it becomes, I have to right this wrong that the court committed by then stretching litigation out forever. Now, in the scenario we just talked about, I think that the custodial parent probably could benefit from a really strong parent coordinator or PC because the problem is when your kids are younger and they're going back and forth, you're separated. When you're intact in a household, you know what the other parent's deficiencies are. Separated, you're not behind the curtain anymore. You don't know
right.
really, in fact, what's going on over there. So it may be helpful to get a parent coordinator to say, this is what bedtime needs to be, right? This is what the sleep hygiene needs to look like. This is when we're going to study. This is how we're going to unwind. And maybe the kids are overloaded with activities. Maybe they're overloaded with technology. They're not doing anything. They're just full of pent up energy. So it would be helpful to have a third party, again, other than the ex spouse, say, let's do bedtime at 8 o'clock.
Right.
If the kids continue
Right.
to come back cranky and dysregulated, then there needs to be an exploration as to what's really going on there. One thing I really encourage this parent to consider is counseling for the kids.
Yeah.
Maybe there's other stressors, other issues, other problems that they're struggling with. If they're coming back just after a couple of days, the non-custodial parent, if they're just there every other weekend, that's really not enough time to unravel all the work that the custodial parent does as the daily parent. So
Right.
to me, that seems that there's more going on there and perhaps some therapeutic interventions, particularly with someone who understands high conflict, personality disorders, not new as a newer therapist or new to high conflict would be ideal.
Right. And that's a perfect segue into our last question, which is this person, she's been told by her attorney, don't say the word narcissist, don't say gas, especially the term gaslighting and several other terms, word salad and something else. Don't say those things in any situation where you're in front of a judge because the court system is sick of hearing these terms. Is that true? Is what they ask.
I think it's a valid concern, and I like that this attorney is in tune enough to know that who their audience is and what this person wants to hear and not hear. I too have counseled in the same way for different reasons, not necessarily because these terms are thrown around a lot, but and that's something I do want to talk to you about because they are overused. Everyone thinks that their ex is a narcissist. I'll just say it, right?
Right.
And
It's
so the
true.
terms are overused. For me, though, I like to describe the behavior. Our judges are smart. They see a lot. They hear a lot about different families and dynamics and relationships. I trust that they are intelligent enough when I just have my client describe a behavior that they'll be able to figure out that that's gaslighting, that they'll be able to
Okay.
figure out that that's love bombing, that they'll figure out it's manipulative. And so for me, it's you describe what's happening, let the judge make the conclusion, because that's what it is, gaslighting, love bombing, manipulative behavior, whatever it is. Let the judge make those decisions. That's what the trier of fact is supposed to do.
Okay. Well, I have a situation with a colleague who I'm curious about. It's actually a he. He was the breadwinner. Not that the spouse couldn't work or hasn't worked, but he was always the breadwinner. And every time he sneezes, they're back in court because she believes that he's hiding money, even though they've had a forensic accountant and, over and over and over and ad nauseum. He has said to me, when does it end? And I've said to him, when your kids are out of college is probably legally when that ends, and that's the only time it ends. Is that pretty much the case?
Yeah, Kristen, tell me your friend's case is where are they in the trajectory? They're separated?
They are actually divorced and sharing joint custody.
Okay. And is he paying alimony
Yes, alimony and child support.
and child support? And they divided the marital estate?
Yep, all of that's done. But if there's even a whisper of a raise for him or a bonus or anything like that, even if nothing has happened, boy, there's a court order.
Right. Or if he takes the kids on a nice vacation.
Right.
So
Right.
a couple of things. I am not a huge fan of alimony court order. I think there's a lot of exposure to both parties, actually, spouse and the supporting spouse. I prefer to see alimony in a separation agreement. I see alimony often being used as a weapon to perpetuate conflict.
Right.
A tether that, so oftentimes the supporting spouse will use the ability to modify anytime the other party seems to be in financial position or maybe is dating, have you, or their income has dipped or they didn't get the bonus they thought they were going to get. I see the supporting spouse use it as a way to sort of drain the alimony that's being received by the dependent spouse. And then I see dependent spouses use it as a means to kind of keep that financial connection going.
Right.
It's like a monster, right? They just want more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And
Right.
I do see a perpetual cycle of abuse that continues on, even with it sounds like permanent orders are in place, permanent custody, joint 50-50, permanent child support, and alimony. Those are permanent orders. Now, all of them can be modified by a showing of a substantial change in circumstances. The question is when does that occur and when does that not occur? And that's the cycle that it sounds like your friend's in. I'm curious if your friend considered maybe trying to do like a lump sum, go the F away alimony payment. Like here's a
Right.
specific, like leave me alone, and taking it out of the court system. Now, child support obviously is still going to be in play there. And depending on your friend's income, I'm curious because I have this case in North Carolina called the Bishop case that came out fairly recently, and it's sort of a backdoor to alimony. So the case is for high wage earners that exceed the guideline amount. And I believe right
Yeah.
now the guidelines are 360,000 combined gross income. If you earn more than that, you're off the guidelines, and anyone can always ask for a deviation off the guidelines anyway. That's when the court's actually analyzing the actual needs of the children. The
Okay.
Bishop case, it was a deviation off the guidelines case, and the court ordered mom, who was the alimony had. I don't remember why alimony was not in play. The term was up, or there was a reason she wasn't getting alimony, but it was strictly just a child support case. Court gave mom more money in child support than she actually presented evidence of in terms of expenses. It went up to the Court of Appeals, and the appeals court said, no, this is fine. Court did this analysis and decided that this is what kids' expenses would be if she were on sort of more equal playing field to dad, and dad's house shouldn't just be the place for the Disney cruises and the expensive, beach
Right.
trips or snowing trips, that they should be more on like equal playing field. And I thought that was really curious as well in terms of the argument there that you're sort of adding a quasi alimony claim to that
Right.
by kind of equalizing the household.
What I find interesting about these things is, like I have another friend that there isn't a question in this one. And this is a case, not in North Carolina, who, has had the same judge forever. And she can tell in the courtroom, she says that the judge really likes her ex's attorney. And they golf or what have you. And she called me so excited because this judge retired early, and that's the only way that so she's ecstatic because she's going to finally get a different judge. And there have been so many things that have gone on that have made this case really difficult. But here's an interesting situation: the child is not a minor anymore, and the ex is still trying to sue her for this, that, and the other. I mean, there are things like that go on. Have you dealt with things like that?
There are some, I feel like there are just some litigants that use the court system to perpetuate their abuse and never want to stop fighting.
Yes, exactly. They have the money, and this is all that they have to do with their time. I mean, how do you deal with that as an attorney?
Those are the most heartbreaking cases. If there's a way to cut the cord, right? You're not receiving financial support. All the money's been divided in terms of the marital estate, and you're able to figure out a way so that there's not this need for routine contact, especially over money. That's ideal. Cleanest breaks, and we talked about this last time. We discussed a lot about cases that were just financial, but those are the easiest cases. Harder
Mm,
cases are cases that involve children who have an ongoing need of support till they're 18. And this is a very entitled viewpoint, but if you're able to afford to have children without the financial tether, do it. If you
right.
can't, you can't. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people, particularly women, who end up in a situation with the high wage earner who they've supported, in various ways, either through the household, through grad school or residencies or what have you. And their ability to earn is $50,000, $60,000 a year now that they've separated, whereas the spouse's ability is, $3, $4, $5 million, right? It just goes up
Right.
from 300,000 up, and they'll never ever be that person. And so those are the harder cases because the financial abuse, something that is constantly utilized as a way to perpetuate contact, that financial tether, and just the war, the war of high conflict divorce.
That's what's interesting. I mean, every narcissist has their own way of, they all have a different way in and a different way out from them. So it's, a lot of times you can't just cookie cutter an answer because they're disordered thinking people. I think what people get into that's difficult is they try to reason and rationalize what the person is doing. And the answer to that is you don't have a disordered mind. So you make your mind disordered if you keep trying to figure out everything.
Kristen, again, goes to exactly how well you know the subject matter, because we talked previously about how there's somewhat of a formula that, like, once you learn, you
Right.
kind of can predict certain things. But in the same respect, if you're not looking at it with a disordered lens, you're looking at it through your regular lens, it's very hard to understand somebody else's crazy thinking.
Right.
And
And-
each case is super unique in that you're juggling the various personalities, any disorders, any mental health diagnoses, substance abuse, coercive controlling behavior. And it's literally like moves on a chessboard. Every single move, every single word, every single negotiation or not negotiation, non-negotiations are relevant and they're important. So I was thinking, about your friend, trying to figure out every time I sneeze, she's got me in court on financial issues. And I'm thinking,
Right.
well, there's a mole somewhere, right? Somebody's talking. And for him, he needs to lock down his finances. He needs to make sure that the children they share don't go on his devices, there's no
Right.
shared iPad that has his messages or phone numbers or what have you on there. And that there's a real separation between his personal finances and work finances and his children, anyone
Right.
kind of in his domain, because someone's filling mom's ear with, daddy got a new raise, or you're not going to believe this, but Chuck got, promoted at work. Like somebody's telling her
Right.
information.
It's
again,
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Kids do this to curry favor. So, hey, mom, you're not going to believe this, but dad just got a new Porsche, or dad's taking us to Aspen for a big ski trip, or dad got a raise at work. Kids feed this information to the co-parent to get favor from the co-parent.
Right. Man, you have to live your life well, that's what it is. And unfortunately, that the only thing that you can do is say, at least you don't have to do it 24/7 like you did when you were married to that person.
Right. And you have to lock down pertinent data that you do not want to go across the aisle.
Right.
And I think it's good parenting, period. Kids don't need to be worried about money and promotions and what have you, right? Like, they don't need to be worried about that stuff anyway. And I think a big mistake that people do in these high conflict cases is their kids are all over their devices.
Yeah.
And then the kids know all about attorney-client communication, text messages, all sorts of stuff they really have no business seeing. And they also can easily tell the other side all that information.
Right. Yeah.
Typically, the quote friend who remained neutral, who isn't getting involved, but presses you frequently is probably another source.
It's kind of amazing how much you have to really take inventory of every single thing from sunup to sundown that's going on in your life.
Right. Because it's so high conflict that access to any little bit of your life could make everything unravel. So it's really best to create a sterile environment in terms of how data is shared and disseminated.
Mm. Have you dealt with cases, or have you heard of? I don't want to say dealt with because then that would be giving away information. Okay. Have you heard of cases where they just keep getting back together, and then breaking up and getting back together and breaking up, and you see a pattern, how, and then, all of a sudden rescue me. Those have to be really challenging to deal with.
So reconciliation's very rare. Couples who go to that point where they actually physically separate, I very rarely see a reconciliation. That's like almost like an anomaly. Now, what
Okay.
I do see is real, true domestic violence. There being a pattern that results in a cyclical relationship where it gets explosive, the perpetrator of the abuse is volatile, is abusive, whether that be emotionally or sexually or physically, all of the above. And the victim blames themselves, blames others, doesn't take responsibility, doesn't get out. Because when people are so abused, they feel so terrible about themselves that they don't feel empowered enough to leave, to open that door and just walk through that threshold. They feel like they're not capable of much of anything. And
Right.
those cases that are the most heartbreaking, those cases that are the most dangerous in terms of the scale, the level of alert for domestic violence, and have the most cyclical, we're separating, we're together, we're separating, we're together, we're separating, we're together. And there's really tends not to be any huge period of separation. It's usually all very quick. Those are the scariest cases to be involved in, and they're the most tragic because domestic violence tends to escalate over time. I see cases that involve threats of suicide, hands like strangulation, and start going around the neck. And I'm very aware that this case is in a red zone deep. And unfortunately, those cases tend to have a lot of volatility. And I'm always careful with my DV victims. I always fear that they're going to reconcile with their abuser and then compromise our case, the things I've shared with them. It's a very delicate dance, and unfortunately, don't have happy endings. Abusers don't just stop being abused. And I often see those cases turn into mutual abuse, where the victim has been abused for so long, is so afraid, is so volatile, is so anxious and insecure that they then start exploding.
Wow.
Like Lorena Bobbitt, that's a great example of real DV over time to the point where she literally cut his penis off. She's the victim, right? Who then went and did an act of abuse. That's the exact pattern that I'm talking about.
Right. And how long is someone supposed to stay I mean, what is the breaking point for someone to, to finally just say, I've had it and I'm going to, you know, I'm going to attack
Never
back.
stay. Never stay with someone who abuses. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. Because
Yeah.
one, it only gets worse. And two, you're worthy of being in a non-abusive relationship.
Yeah, and those things take time. They take time to learn. Yeah, they definitely they take their time to through therapy, through being away. I don't think people take a lot of credence, and I know, well, I can imagine what you'd think about this, but no contact is such a huge, important. If you can go no or low contact, that is vital to your healing. It has nothing to do with what they're doing other than not continuing to escalate. But for your healing, it's imperative.
So no contact for sure. So hard to make that happen when there's children involved, unfortunately. But even more important, no contact's critical, because what happens is that when a victim of abuse, any tether to that person it like reignites the fire. It keeps that fire
Right.
burning. What needs to happen is that fire just needs to get bombed out and never lit again. That means you have to change all of your friends, your social circle, where you're living, your presence online, your
Yep.
phone number, your ability to be found. That, if you're not willing to commit to making those sorts of life changes, you may never get out of the cycle of abuse.
That's what's interesting. Like, you got to be somebody that's willing to go to the mat. Like, you can't halfway this. Like, you have to be willing to go to the mat and to get out. And how determined are you of a person? Because, okay, so you change your phone number, big deal. So you get off of social media, all of these different things you have to do. Do it. It's your life.
Right. And unfortunately, that only works when there's no children and no
Yeah.
ongoing monthly financial stipend. Right? If you're able to separate the money and you don't have kids to communicate about, it's great. But when you have kids, what really irks me that over and over and over again, our Chapter 50 statutes on custody talk about one of the things the court should consider in making a custody decision is acts of domestic violence. And I don't know if it's just that the courts hear it so much and there's so much of it in these high conflict cases that it seems to be overlooked, but someone needs to explain how a victim of domestic violence can share legal custody decision making with their abuser. Because you can't. It's not
Yeah.
possible. And over and over and over again, I see our judges awarding joint fight seeing acts of domestic violence. And I think the mindset is, well, that was between the parents, not the parent and the child. And that's a different relationship, I think, is the justification for it. But you're still requiring a victim to make joint decisions.
Right.
Consult and then decide, right? You have to agree. Orthodontia, no. Doctor, yes or no. This dentist versus that dentist. You actually have to come to an agreement or nothing gets accomplished.
Right.
I don't think that it's possible to make joint decisions with your abuser.
So what does that statement mean then for parents.
Well, I'm definitely putting myself out there for sure. But what it means is that we need to do some reform,
Yeah,
and we need to do more education about explaining what it looks like from a victim's perspective. Have to then co-parent with the person who raped them, who strangled them,
right,
who gaslit and manipulated them for a decade.
right.
It's a big deal. And I
It
don't
is. It's
think,
a huge deal.
right. And there used to be, I feel like, a time in my practice where it was more considered. And I feel like it's being less considered. And this may be, and we talked about this last time, this shift from best interest of the children versus, and I'm going to use the word versus specific, constitutionally protected status of a parent. Our statutes say best interest, but what we're hearing, these arguments about these parents, constitutional rights, and they're paramount, and there are a lot of arguments about that, and the courts are very persuaded about these constitutional rights that these parents have.
Yeah. And
It's a
you've got to do,
no-brainer. And
yeah,
when you're saying, hey, parents, you're going to co-parent someone who's committed acts of domestic violence against you and reach mutual joint decisions together.
yeah,
Like, I feel like if you inventoried anybody on that in phrasing it that way, everyone would tell you that's not possible.
exactly. Exactly. You can't come to a sensible, that's why this person has a disordered mind. So to me, it's like the court is still trying to find a way. I watch it in terms of how systems work. So it's, to me, it's like the court is still trying to find a way to understand both minds of the parents. And you cannot, that will never happen. That's not ever going to work, but it's understandable because it's what we try to do as human beings. We try to understand. But there's one brain in this scenario that is not understandable because it's disordered. And that
And
seems to
what,
escape some people's minds
right.
that's actually a factor here.
And that disordered mind then uses children as pawns to further
Yep.
manipulate and control their own agenda.
They can't see past. I mean, that's something that there are neighbors that mean well. Everyone wants to give you their very short, kind of pithy argument. Well, just take them to court. And they have no idea what that involves. It's just a way to get you to be quiet because people don't want to keep talking about, they don't want to keep hearing about a situation, like this because it doesn't fit within the order of their everyday life. Well, that's right. That's the hell this person is in. They're living with or they've been dealing with someone who's disordered. And you're never going to make order out of that. The only thing you can do is make order out of, or kind of, just to know, oh, okay, so if we do this, my ex is going to react this way and just sort of navigate those time bombs and try to get around them as much as you can.
Right. And what I also have learned is when there are that tether of children that never, and I mean, look, your duty to support your kids ends at 18 and graduates from high school.
Right.
And so they're 18 for a custody order and 18 for child support graduated from high school. There's a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, it's 18 graduates from high school. There's no duty to support your kids through college. or past that. So but that's a myth because everybody knows that parenting doesn't just magically end like a light switch. It turns 18. Okay, I'm not a parent anymore. Good luck. Have fun out there.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
You're stuck interacting with this person who have kids really forever. There's really no end to that. Now there can be boundaries. There can be ways to make sure you're doing it in a way that's healthy for yourself. But there'll be graduations, there'll be weddings, there'll be grandchildren being born, and parties and celebrations, and maybe funerals and other things along the way in life that will have you crossing paths. Really, the best way to get yourself there is to do your own healing.
Yes.
And find a slot kind of in your brain for that person in which you tolerate them for those brief encounters. Owning your own narrative for that. That's an ongoing process. But what I really find meaningful and helpful is for the children that are involved in these cases to have their own mental health services available to them. Because
yes.
You really can't say, look, Mommy's a narcissist, and that's why she acts like that. This is what's really going on here, and you need to be aware to protect yourself. You really can't say that to a child. One, it's not appropriate. Two, it's going to just go straight over their head. They're not going to understand what you're talking about. But getting them into mental health services that they can learn to navigate that parent the best way that they can do it, and learning how to have the tools that the child needs to navigate that parent, the best thing you can do.
Yep.
They're learning it their own way. It goes all the way back to, do we tell the judge this person's a narcissist? No. We let the judge learn that on their own.
Right? Exactly.
You're doing the same thing with your child. The difference is that you're giving your child this toolkit called mental health, a great toolkit. And that way they know, in this situation, I need the screwdriver. Nope, this time I need the hammer. Nope, this time I need, the wrench. And they have the tools available to them to navigate this very difficult personality that is going to disappoint, is going to manipulate, but is also half that child.
Right.
And they're going to be on a much better path to knowing how their parent operates, because they are half that person. They are wired genetically to get them better than you are.
Yeah, and what you want to make sure of too is, okay, well, unfortunately, you've experienced this kind of person, and I don't want you to grow up thinking that that's normal, because it's not. And we certainly don't want you to get involved with people like this, because to you, this kind of behavior is normal. That's where the mental health piece comes in. A great counselor can be like, well, yeah, these are behaviors that are not acceptable.
Right, that was super manipulative. That's what gaslighting, or your father just love bombed you. That's what they can use those words. They can give descriptors. They can explain and define. Better that it not come from the parent.
Right, exactly. Evonne, tell our listeners where they can find more about you.
I'm at RaleighLawCenter.com.
Fantastic. Thank you again for coming on and answering questions, and for doing what you do.
Thanks. I love the questions, so I hope they keep coming in.
But will you ride the low, low, lows with me? Will you ride the low, low, lows with me?
one thing you can always count on at Mental Health News Radio Network and my show is that there will always be dogs around. Why? They are natural healers, excellent for your mental health. The original therapy dog Miles has something to say in just a moment. For now, please check out all of our amazing shows at mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com and all your favorite podcast apps. Until next time, I'm Kristen Sananta Walker, and thank you for listening.
And I can write the low, low, lows with me. I can write the low, low, lows with me. Till my vision clears up perfectly. I can write the low, low, lows with me.
Good boy.